that's what I struggled with for over a decade was I felt like if I stopped drinking that I was going to lose a big part of my business. And what I didn't realize was that if I kept drinking, I was going to lose everything. And it just I was caught in that trap in between of saying I can't live with it and I can't live without it. So I kept trying to figure out different ways to moderate it, and it was just kicking my ass.
Hey, welcome to Unlatched Minds. This is episode 66. My guest today is J.W. Ross. J.W. is the CEO and founder of Botanic Tonics. They're a company who created this small tonic, this small little drink called Feel Free, and it's pretty much blown up at this point. I don't remember exactly when I first heard about it, but anyway, it started coming across a lot of my feeds, a lot of the podcasts I listened to were talking about it, and there's some controversy around the product, right? The two main ingredients are Kava and Kratom. Kratom comes with a little bit more controversy. It's not legal in every state. It's federally legal, but not legal in I think it's 6 states, I believe. But there's all sorts of regulation that they're trying to swirl around it, and there's a bunch of misinformation and big lobby and farmer are involved a little, and the DEA was involved, and a lot of flawed studies with bad data, and the whole thing was just interesting to read about. So anyway, we get into all that. JW kind of catches us up on where things are at there and what's going on with the product and some of the regulation coming downstream and where he sees it going. And honestly, most interestingly, we discussed his background, his family life, his history, his story really. That when you kind of look into it, we discuss some of his battles with alcoholism and drug addiction, some of the things that really drove him to create this product as when he was really looking for a social lubricant, something to kind of ease some of the social anxiety he grew up with. So anyway, with that, let's jump in. I give you J.W. Ross.
I lived in a communist country for several years,
Oh, you did?
and
Where did you live?
in Vietnam, and I got a different sense of just what you're talking about how I think we're somewhat ignorant as to how controlled we actually are.
Mm-hmm.
I got a feeling when I lived there that I had more freedom than I have here.
Really?
Yeah,
Huh.
which is a strange thing to say.
Interesting.
As long as you didn't say something, bad about the government,
Right.
you could pretty much do whatever you wanted to do. If you said something bad about the government, then you had a problem. But the government didn't really give you reason to say anything bad about them because they weren't messing with your business like they are here. It's an
Yeah.
odd thing.
Interesting. So I guess are you feeling a lot of regulation and other things what you're going through? Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, I see how. I mean, we're in a very carnivore type capitalistic system here now, where big lobby groups, companies control
Control
a lot
everything.
more than most people think.
Amen. Yeah.
And if you're trying to change things, they'll come after you from all directions, and the main tool that they use is government.
Yeah. 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 I knew. Well, that's funny. We can get to this later, but with the because I saw some of your previous episodes and you talk about sugar and the cocaine industry or the coca leaves and how that's all comes in through a certain through a certain perspective. It's all controlled and the monopoly they have. And yeah, right, if big lobby is not involved or they're against you, good luck. I mean,
Yeah,
right,
it's I
it's
mean,
insane.
and here's an extreme example of it's Juul. Juul created a great product. The science was bulletproof. It saved people's lives. Now Juul screwed up by candy flavors and marketing it to kids. But beyond that, what they were doing was saving a lot of lives because it was the first thing that came along that actually would that people would put their cigarettes down and actually vape instead, and that's a lot less dangerous than smoking. But it doesn't matter.
Mm.
I mean, if you get,
Yep.
the facts don't matter. Safety data doesn't matter. Any of that doesn't matter. If you get on the wrong side of something, it's the narrative and the spin and all that gets involved that dictates what happens.
Yeah, and if you start saying things like you're saying, even supported by all the data, you immediately get put in this category of some kind of conspiracy theorist. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
there's no way that could be true. It's like, no,
I
no,
mean,
it actually is true. There's the forces at play are
I
monstrously
saw a thing
organized.
this weekend where the FDA approved a precursor drug or pre-test drug for opioids. So now you can take a drug to test your addictive profile for opioids so that then that they can prescribe opioids to you. So they're figuring out a way, even though everything says they shouldn't be doing it in the first place,
Mm.
they're figuring out a way to keep selling them by saying, no, now we have a drug you can take to test and see if you can take them or not. I was just like,
Eh,
when does it stop? It's like, this, no matter what the data is saying it's killing millions of people, they're still
mm.
selling them. And then they
Yeah.
want to go after things that don't really show to be that dangerous
Well, of
at the
course,
same time.
yeah. If you're, and I know we'll get to this, and feel free in the products you're creating, regardless of the safety data, regardless of how many people they're helping, it's
Yeah.
taking out of their pocket, right? It's taking out of it's another
It,
option, which
you
is a
know,
competition in a
I've
sense, right?
actually, over the last couple months, I've changed a lot of my thought patterns about that. I don't really think now it's as much that
Mm,
as it is. I think that there's a misunderstanding of kratom and the difference between the different types of kratom.
mm,
And I think everybody's just throwing kratom in one bucket, and you can't do that. It'd be like throwing CBD in with high concentration THC.
mm.
It's two totally separate things, and it has two totally different uses, safety profiles, and all of that. And you just can't
Yeah,
say kratom. You need to say what type of kratom,
right,
and
right, right.
that's
There's all
where we're
different
going to be
strains
spending.
and alkaloid profiles. Yeah, I mean, you got to get down to the biochemistry to understand what
Yeah,
we're talking about, right?
and that's where we're going to start spending a lot of our time. I mean, another example would be the difference between like beer and Everclear, or coca
Right,
leaves and
right, right.
cocaine. I mean, they're not the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not even used for the same thing. I mean, it's
It's like anything we do, right? Humans, we have agendas all the time, and we'll take a general category, and if you break things down,
it's
that they're very differently. We can organize those categories in any way to fit our agenda, and then
and I don't. I just finished having a call with a couple of former FDA officials, and I don't think it's that. I think a lot of it's ignorance. They
mm,
just don't. They haven't stopped to think about that there is a difference.
yeah,
They just want to lump everything together because it's easier that way.
mm,
So I
yeah,
don't. I'm beginning to think it's not so much it's this conspiracy or something like that. It's just
laziness or
it's a
just
lack of education. Yeah, and it's just easier.
too much going on. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So our big part of what we're going to do in 24 is an education campaign to educate people that there is a difference, and we're going to be coming out of the chute asking for separate regulation for whole leaf kratom,
mm,
um, and we're also going to ask that tax be put in place um, to fund the compliance of it
hmm.
and enforcement,
Seems
which
like the
is
safest approach. I mean, the approach that would have the highest probability of success. You're asking government intervention. You come and work with me on this.
yeah,
You're not trying to
yeah.
bypass
So
in any way.
I
Yeah.
think I've evolved from hate the government, all that kind of stuff
Mm,
to I think I know how to work with them where they get a win and we get a win, and more importantly the consumers get a win.
mm, right.
The baby doesn't get thrown out with the bathwater. but the consumers are protected from, these products that probably shouldn't be on the shelves.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Um, there's a new tax source for the government and for, enforcement of the regulations. To me, it's taken me a long time to evolve to this, but I think that's the answer.
Sounds like a wise approach. Yeah, it
Because
does. Yeah.
you're not going to beat them,
Oh, hell no. Hell no. Yeah.
no
Good luck
matter
with
what.
that.
I mean, it,
Yeah.
because the facts don't always dictate the end result.
Right. Well, they can create their own facts and massage other facts to make you look like you're right. 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 So let's get to that. But so first of all, JW, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I know
Yeah,
this is a long time coming with everyone's schedules.
yeah. I'm
So
sorry about being so hard to get a hold of. I was in Vanuatu, and
no,
it's just
yeah,
reception
yeah.
there is horrible.
No, not at all. No, no problem at all. Seriously. But so we'll talk about Feel Free and your product, and I'm curious to know what's going on with it. I've seen this couple, podcasts you've done recently where I think you got some new stuff coming out, or maybe it's already come out, but I want to get into that too. That it seemed pretty interesting. Some of the stuff you have planned, but your I always start usually with with these podcasts with, hey, give you a little background on yourself. And a lot of times it has nothing, it just kind of paints a picture of who the person is I'm
Yeah,
talking to.
yeah,
In your case, I think it really did, I assume you'd agree, but your backstory is sort of interesting because it kind of laid the foundation of how you stumbled upon creating this pretty cool product. I don't know. I feel like you had a journey that led you there. At least that's the way I kind of see your story. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so just give me a little. How did you get to creating this product? What's your backstory?
So I didn't do it for commercial reasons to begin with. I
Mm,
started because I was trying to solve an issue that I have personally, and that's social anxiety.
mm,
Um, I have, always suffered with social anxiety, not feeling comfortable in my own skin, and needed something to, help, tamper that down.
lubricate.
Uh, when I started
Yeah.
out, started in the oil and gas business in the early '80s. Had a lot of success very early on. Um, my mentors were, now I realize, all functioning alcoholics. So, the mentality was work hard, play harder.
Mm,
The primary, substance of use was alcohol, other drugs too, but mainly alcohol. And over a period of time, as my success, became more and more, my alcohol consumption also became more and more, even more so, and got to a point where the two collided, and things were starting to really go upside down.
mm,
And fortunately, I was able to go into treatment, 90-day inpatient treatment. And from that, I came out. That's 15 years ago, and had a drink since.
mm,
But when I came out, I realized why I'd been drinking. I don't think I'd really thought about it before. I just thought that's what everybody did. Uh, that, I was, the social anxiety was so bad that I was isolating myself. And I knew that if I didn't find something to take care of that I would go back to drinking, and I knew that that wouldn't end well at all.
mm,
So um, I started looking in the market to try the social lubricants that are out there that are legal. None of those really did anything for me. Um, and then I tried all the illegal stuff. Uh, all of that did too much, or did things that I didn't want it to do, because I wanted something I could do during the day. I could go to work out. I could, work.
yeah.
I didn't want something that was inebriating.
Hmm.
So I couldn't find it, either legal or illegal. So I set up a lab in my house, an informal lab, and I started ordering in. I started doing research on plants that have been used for centuries around the world, different substances.
Mm,
Started ordering things in. I had had some experiences earlier in life with Kava, 40 years ago, and Kratom while I was in Southeast Asia, and I ordered those plants in, and a handful of others, and started mixing different percentages, and It's about a 2-year process,
Wow.
and I finally found the right combination, the right strains, the right percentages, all of that. And in the process of doing this, I was also using my friends and family as guinea pigs. And when I came across the formula that's now Feel Free Classic, everyone was like, "Man, you need to sell this stuff." So that's how I got into consumer packaged goods. So we launched Botanic Tonics, which is the company that has Feel Free, in May of 2020.
2020. Now it's blown up. Safe to
Yeah,
say.
yeah,
Yeah. Rogan's mentioned it quite a few times, which must be fantastic for business.
yeah. It's interesting because that's not a paid partnership or anything.
No, no,
It's
I've heard, I've been following him for years, and he brings it up just because the folks at his new club just love it.
Yeah,
Period, and he just
yeah.
mentions it.
No,
Yeah,
Ron White
yeah,
was
that's right.
using it and had some in the green room, and
Yep,
he came in and Rogan said, "What what's that?" And he said, "Well, he goes, I don't go out anymore without drinking a half a bottle of this." And
right.
Rogan did the same, and he's like, "Oh my gosh," he goes, I just crushed the best set I've had in
Yep.
years,"
Yeah, you
and
can't
he's
get
been
better
using it
advertising
since.
than that. Yeah, yeah. Because
Yeah, no,
Ron stopped drinking. I think he stopped
Ron's
drinking.
not drinking.
Right,
Yeah.
and that was a big yeah.
He actually is friends with another guy that I know in Austin, and
Hmm,
uh, he introduced it to him, knowing that Ron's for someone that's in his occupation, he suffers similar to what I do,
hmm,
anxiety, social anxiety, and
yeah,
that's he figured out also that's why he was abusing alcohol.
yeah,
So he's been using it to help with that.
yeah. And it's amazing. I I've been sort of on this diatribe lately. How we live in an alcohol soaked society, right? So it seems so commonplace, and everyone thinks that it's kind of okay, even drinking socially. And I think the data is starting to come in more and more. And look, I enjoy a drink. I've never been a anti drink person, but the data's in. Drinking alcohol is pretty damn bad for you. Even in
Well,
moderation, now they're showing it's really not good for the brain. And
it's
then
been really interesting, and hey, for a lot of people, alcohol is probably a net positive, but it really has been interesting to watch the progression of the understanding of alcohol and what
yeah,
it's actually doing to you. And now you have Huberman and all of them coming on saying
Huberman Lab, yeah, yeah,
even a small amount, but when you think about it, you step back, you're like, it's an antiseptic,
hmm,
and you're drinking an antiseptic. You wouldn't drink any other antiseptic. In fact, it says on the bottle not to.
right,
You're why would you think if you put that in your body that it's not causing harm? I mean,
correct, right,
it's just, and I don't, because of what you said, because it's so ingrained in our society and celebrations and,
yeah,
wine paired with different food and, and all of that, it's just was never thought of that way.
yeah.
In fact, it was thought of if you didn't drink, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the
I can
only drug I
remember
think you looked at odd or weird if you don't
yeah,
do. It's the only
many
drug, right?
times
Yeah.
people were like, I would try to not drink, and they're like, what's your deal? What's wrong with you?
Right.
Make fun of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. It even affects business. I have friends kind of in some of these, some high stress business type environments, and they're like, and they're trying to and they drink too much, and it's like I'm trying to cut back, and we had this long conversation over the past several years since COVID, really, and this I think there's more been a sort of tendency for people to seek mocktails, not cocktails, and all that. I think so many people did so much drinking over COVID, but a buddy of mine made a good point. He said it actually hurts business because so much business and camaraderie is built around alcohol. When you're that person that's not drinking for whatever reason, it just
Oh yeah,
you're kind of viewed as an on the outside. You actually can damage your business acumen. You're on the
yeah, and
outside. So
that's what I struggled with for over a decade.
mm,
Was I felt like if I stopped drinking, that I was going to lose a big part of my business.
it's
And
crazy,
what
right?
I didn't realize was that if I kept drinking, I was going to lose everything.
Yeah, That's
And it
yeah.
just, I was caught in that trap in between of saying, I can't live with it and I can't
Can't
live
live with
without
it.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I kept trying to figure out different ways to moderate it, and it was just kicking my ass.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And you know the difference. We'll get to feel free in a second, but you have some kava or kratom. The next day, you don't feel bad at all. There's nothing there. Alcohol almost every time, even if even in moderate doses. The next day, your body's telling you something. Like, what did you do? You
Yeah,
poisoned me last night, right?
well, I think that goes back to the antiseptic part of it. I mean, it's killing things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's giving you social lubrication and all of that, but it's also, it's physically not good for you.
Right.
And that's why the next day you don't feel good, is because you've somewhat poisoned yourself
Right.
to different degrees, and no wonder you don't feel good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it really is fascinating to me because now, having spent quite a bit of time in the Pacific Islands, where kava for centuries has been used like we used alcohol here, and in a lot of those societies they don't have alcohol. Period. Um, is to see how different it is,
Mm,
um, and also see how effective it is at social lubrication, just like alcohol is. Kava does. It's a great social lubricant, but it does it in a completely different way.
right.
So alcohol amplifies you. Liquid courage
Right.
lowers your inhibitions, all of that. You become, louder, more forceful.
Mm,
Um, and you can see that in an alcohol bar, especially as the night goes on, more alcohol is served, the noise level keeps going up and up. If it's the right conditions, younger people, somebody might get in a fight, somebody's going to be doing this and that, say things they shouldn't say.
every
You
time.
don't see that.
That's right.
You don't see that in a kava bar. You'll
Mm,
see people sitting, having pleasant conversation, having a good time, maybe, dancing, whatever, but it's not loud
yeah.
and people aren't trying to talk over each other. And the reason for that is the way it provides social lubrication is it actually quietens you down.
Mm,
So it removes some ego. And then when it does that, it allows you then to open up and really listen to the people around you and really have a deeper connection with them and actually care about what they're saying. And that creates that social lubrication
right.
that then you're able to have a real meaningful, enjoyable conversation with them. Uh, it's to me, it's fascinating that you get to the same place, but doing two totally separate things.
Yeah, it feels like alcohol is almost. I mean, it is very effective, right? But it's almost like it's a fake social lubricant because it. To your point about the kava gets you a little bit more. It almost seems like more. I don't know, organically get you in touch with other people, or like it lowers that anxiety, and alcohol almost seems to put a mask over it because you don't I don't have never heard a story like you said, you do some research online, you find all sorts of crazy stuff. You take all that out of on both sides, you don't hear any crazy kava stories. Oh, I can't believe I had kava the other night and I did X, Y, and Z. None. You don't hear that.
Yeah. I mean, I've
Alcohol, that's all
never,
you hear. I mean, right?
yeah,
It's like
I don't know how many mornings I woke up and didn't remember, somebody would tell me you did this or that. And I'm like, oh God, I can't, that can't be, or, you know,
right.
and that does not happen to me with kava.
Mm,
I mean, I
right.
wake up, I remember exactly what all happened.
Right.
But I had just as good a time. Actually, I have a better time, and I damn sure feel better.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So again, getting back to your product, so you said you started little kind of makeshift lab in your kitchen, and you were getting a
Yep.
bunch of. So now, were you primarily just kind of mixing certain kava strains with certain kratom strains until you
No,
said,
actually, I used Kana and several other. I've got everything I can get my hands
mm,
on, uh, and again, a lot of it you source this stuff in from different places, and it's the quality of it's all different levels,
yeah,
and just because you get something from here doesn't mean that that's what it can do. So you had to I'd
mm,
source in hundreds of different samples of different things from different places.
Mm, okay. And how do you know? So you said you're using some friends as like guinea pigs. Was it because I mean, kratom and kava both are. I mean, if you look at the alkaloid sort of spectrum, it's so. I mean, it's such a variety, right? How are you sort of turning those knobs? I'm like, okay, that's the one more of this, less of that, and
Yeah, they're like most natural substances or plants. It depends even on the season and the environment that it's
mm,
grown in. You can take the same uh, variety and grown under different conditions, it's going to have different characteristics of actives.
mm,
But you know, and like cannabis, the especially the kava, you've got versions of it that are more floaty feeling, and you got versions of it that are more sedative.
mm,
And now that we've really gotten into it and have our own labs and all that, I realize that it's because of the kava lactone profiles. I mean, there's a
yeah,
plethora of different kava lactones, and the ratio that they are dictates what the feeling is.
yeah. You always hear heady versus heavy, right? That's a
Yeah,
kava sort
yeah,
of heady versus
yeah.
heavy. Yeah, interesting.
And then the same thing with kratom, but kratom, it's more so about, in my mind now, it's about the way that it's dried.
Mm,
So if it's dried in the sunlight, it it changes it a little bit versus being dried, in the shade.
mm.
Um, it's not so much in my mind, and I know there's the three strains and all of that, but I don't know that I buy into all of that. I think some of that's just marketing. I think it's really more about the way that it's processed.
This is the white, green, and red. Those are three.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is growing some trees in Florida, kratom trees, and you can look at the tree and the leaves, and they'll have all three different vein colors in the same tree. I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
and but you can take that, and depending on how you dry it,
Mm.
you can get a different effect out of it.
Or is it the speed of drying? It must. I mean, or is it? Who knows?
I think it has to do with the light,
Oh,
um,
the actual like
the
sunlight.
ultraviolet light, or what that it actually alters it a little bit.
Hmm. Interesting. Very interesting. So, when did you first? So you said you launched in 2020. Is that when you actually put it in stores? And I think you were going
Yes,
like,
started here in California. Put it in about 120 stores or so, and then started. From that, it was it immediately took off. I mean, the product works, as you know, and then we started building out our distribution system across the U.S. and we're in about almost 15,000 stores now.
wow. Now, when you first launched, did you have a big marketing campaign, or just drop it off and see what happens?
Not really. We didn't have a big budget.
Yeah, yeah.
Never have had a big budget, so it really was more about word of mouth, and it still is. I mean, we do the surveys, and a third of our, when you ask people where they heard about it, it's about a third of it's from other people that are using it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you had a quote a while ago, and I don't know. You quoted somebody else saying this, but I think it was an investor of yours, either past or present, that said if you can change someone's mind, if you change someone's mood for the better in 30 minutes or less, you're onto something. I forgot the exact quote, but
Yeah,
I always remember that.
I don't know why I never thought about it that way, and maybe it took somebody that's out of the box. I mean, very very intelligent guy,
Mm,
very successful in the medical field, and he said that, and I when I left, I thought about it, and he's absolutely right. I mean,
yeah.
you look back, even going back to Coca Cola, and of course, the first version of Coca Cola was a very functional drink. But I don't think people realize how much of a functional drink Coca Cola still is. Uh, people say it tastes good. And probably the first time you ever had it, it didn't taste that great. I mean, the sugar in it, but it's more about how it makes you feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it does make you feel good. Um, I mean, another great example of that is Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
Starbucks. I'm convinced now the success of the Starbucks model isn't coffee, because there were plenty of coffee shops, and it wasn't just the cool environment that they created. It's sugar.
I think sugar
And
plus
when you look at
caffeine
it,
is an amazing combination. Yeah.
if you look at their filings now by weight, they're selling more sugar in milk than they are coffee.
Mm, interesting.
And what has happened over time is they've kept doubling down and doubling down, because they realize that's what the American consumers are after.
Yeah.
So when you go in now, some of those drinks have 20, 30, you know, spoons of sugar in them. I mean,
Oh, if I
and
mean, conservatively, yes. So I've seen
yeah,
some of those larger ones. I mean, it's there's 80 grams of sugar in a couple of them. It's like what I
yeah.
mean.
So
Yeah.
that is definitely going to make you feel different.
Yeah.
So that's a very fun, and when you mix sugar and caffeine, that's a very powerful combination.
It's like getting a warm hug on the way to work in the morning. Who wouldn't want that,
Exactly.
right? Right.
So no matter why, most people, the first stop they make is they stop in to get their Starbucks,
Yep.
because their day is not going to be the same without it. You
No.
know, I talk to people about, they're like, well, they talk about habit forming and addiction and this and that. I'm like, when's the last time that you tried to stop caffeine?
Get out of my head. I say that all the time, JW. All the time. People when they it's just
And they're
because
like,
yeah.
they'll say, well, I haven't. And I'm
Right.
like, well, stop for a couple weeks and see how you feel. And
Terrible.
I've done it myself,
Yep.
and horrible headaches.
Horrible.
I
Yeah.
mean, just and mental fog, and just it it goes away with time. But
Right.
the reason most people don't know that is they've never gotten off of
Right. Right.
it. And I would say, in moderation, like most things, it's fine.
Right.
As long as you don't overconsume it, you can have it every day.
Right.
It's not a big deal. But when you start abusing it, like anything else, then you got a problem.
Exactly. Right. Right. Yeah. So, which brings us to kratom. So, kratom is a little bit
Hmm.
more controversial for whether
Yep.
whether it's justified or not. Um, and one of the things we goes back to is is it habit forming? Is it addictive? And I know those phrases are overloaded, right? Can it be habit
Yeah.
forming versus addiction as two separate things? Um, but just before you answer that question, because I know you probably know, you're battling some things with kratom, I can imagine, because it's not fully legal in every state, and you'll get in a second. But I always look at the same thing you do and say, well, there's obviously some certain things that are way unhealthy out of the gate, right? Some things that we don't want to.
Yep.
No, people shouldn't be taking meth. I don't think there's any positive, like, oh, in moderation, meth's okay. Like, I don't think there's certain things I think we can binarily say,
Meth or fentanyl or any of those things. Yeah,
exactly
that
right,
stuff
right. There's
is
just certain things that they don't. And going back to the habit forming thing, I always look at the same thing like you do. I think we're all self medicating, to varying degrees, and people that say no.
everyone every day with something.
100%. And I say when, and I
Yeah.
just go back to your
Whether you know it or not.
right. I go back to your point. I'm like, when's the last time someone woke up and did not have that cup of coffee? And then some people are like, well, I don't drink coffee, but they drink 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 Diet Cokes a day. I'm like, well, you're getting way more. I mean, you are making
Yeah.
you're altering your brain chemistry daily with something. Very few of us
And
don't do that, right?
I know, there's a real reason why. And again, I think I've gotten a greater appreciation for this now that I've spent a lot of time on, isolated islands.
Yeah.
It is the society that we've created here is much different than what it was.
Yeah.
It's still evolving, but I think the biggest issue that we have, that most people are running around self-medicating for, is stress and anxiety.
100%. Yeah.
And the reason there's so much stress and anxiety is because we're disconnected from nature for the most part.
Yep.
We're eating processed foods. We're information overload. We're not sleeping enough. I mean, that's like the perfect storm for creating stress and anxiety.
Right.
And it just keeps winding up faster and faster and faster. And then we
Yep.
wonder why we're all running around, over consuming things
Right.
because we're treating ourselves. We're
Right.
trying to tamper that stress and anxiety level that we've built down.
Yep.
So to me, it's not about, for most of us, it's not about not doing anything
Yeah.
because we need something. It's about figuring out what can we have and use on a regular basis that works,
Right.
that actually, is our healthiest option.
Right. That'll augment our life, not take away from
Yeah,
it. Right.
yeah.
It's not just going to be a quick fix and then you pay for it the next day. That can actually,
And
enhance.
that's
Yeah.
not going to be the same thing for every person because of our
Yeah.
genetics. Some people, can have a good experience with one thing and not another, and it's vice versa.
Right. Right. But yeah, the reality of our society that you are, I'm broken record here. I've said it to, so I apologize to the listeners, said it a million times. We're at this evolutionary mismatch between our genome and our society. We're social creatures. We're more isolated than ever, even though the internet and social media makes you think you're connected. We're more isolated. We don't go outside nearly as much. We're fluorescent lights above us all the time. We have this stress coming at us at all times, information overload. And our
Yeah,
primitive brain just like, hey man, I just wanted to chase a lion one time and eat natural foods and then,
yeah.
fast food.
And when you hang out and spend time with isolated societies that don't have any of that, and
Mm,
I have, it is so different. I mean, the family units are together. They're gathering food. They're happy. They're singing. They
yeah.
have very low stress levels. It's just they're healthy. They're happy. You see how it really is striking how far we've evolved.
Mm,
And I don't think it's slowing down. Actually, I think it's speeding up. So where this ends, I don't know.
mm-hmm.
Uh, but what I do know is that it's not going to change, at least overnight. I'm not here to try to even do that. Um, what I'm trying to do is figure out for myself,
Yeah.
what can I do to help deal with that, and hopefully that works for others too.
Yeah. So, how difference in feeling from when you first arrive in these countries and then from when you leave? I can imagine. For me, sometimes going on vacation when it's a true vacation where I'm actually like a lot of downtime and I interact with the locals more. The trajectory is really like I come out, I get there, and I'm still in my work mode in my mind, and I'm still back home, and then it takes a day or so, and then I get into this very just I start to just forget about all the crap and and now when I before I come back it starts to ramp back up again. For me that middle period is very much we actually went to my wife and I got married in Fiji, so I do remember we did the Kava ceremony there.
Yep.
This was gosh quite a while ago now, but 2009. But I just remember sitting when we did the ceremony. We sat with the family. They cooked for us, and the fire in the fire pit. And they made all the fresh food that they caught just a couple hours
Yeah.
ago, and it really was it was amazing because you really just the relaxation. I mean, it's a little uncomfortable being in someone else's house, but that was a little hut. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, you can just feel. It's just, I'm very self introspective. I was telling my wife the whole time like this is kind of how we were evolved to be. Like, see how we kind of lost all this. Like, not saying I'm going to go in my
Well,
backyard and dig a fire pit and cook for my
for
family
the
tomorrow, but
for the majority of history, that's how we were.
yeah,
This is. I don't think we realize. You look at the whole curve. What's going on here, but we're on this hockey stick now
oh
of
yeah, yeah,
changing the way
so
that we
fast,
live. So that, like you said, when you go and you immerse yourself in that, especially if you spend, like I'll spend a month or 2 months, it's like, you know, and then when you come back here, you leave the airport and you're like, oh my gosh,
yeah. You see it with
it's
fresh
like,
eyes, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it just feels you probably can feel like it's out of phase with how we how your biology wants to live almost, you know what I mean? I mean, there's a
yeah.
lot of amazing things that come with it too, right? We're not trying to just shit
No,
on the
no,
whole
I'm
new
not
world, but
saying I'm not saying what we're doing is all bad. I'm
yeah.
saying that it's different,
Mm,
and
for sure.
it requires people to have some substances
Yeah.
to offset it. And I'm not sitting here saying that that's all bad, and it can
Yeah.
be bad, but it's not always bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to Kratom, so the feel free um and I'll put the links in the show notes and everything so folks can check it out. But so Kava, we talked about a little bit, and Kava's pretty much there's not much legal issue or controversy around Kava that I've seen in reading. Is that the easy one?
No, the only Kava is probably one of the safest things I've ever seen. I mean, I've not really ever heard of anybody have any issue with
Mm-hmm.
uncontaminated Kava. There was an issue in Germany years ago where there was some contaminated Kava that got distributed, and some people got sick from it. Unfortunately, that got blown way out of
Mm,
proportion because it was an isolated event. But other than that, I mean, you just don't have any issues with Kava.
yeah.
Um,
Was that the
Kratom
salmonella?
is
Was that salmonella? Was that the
salmonella, yeah,
in Germany? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Which you've had salmonella outbreaks with romaine lettuce
Yeah.
multiple
Yeah.
times. I mean, it's not like
Several times.
and
Yeah.
they didn't try to ban romaine lettuce,
Yeah. Sure. Good point. Yeah.
but that got because it was exploding in Europe, the use of kava,
Mm,
um, the other economic interest that it was cutting into the market share banded together and got it banned, and it's just recently been reversed.
mm, interesting. Now, kratom's a little different, a little bit more complicated.
Well, it is since we've gotten a hold of it, yes. uh, so kratom, it's a tree in Southeast Asia.
Mm,
It's in the coffee family. It's alkaloids that are the active component of it. Been used for centuries, primarily by field workers. If you go out in rural Southeast Asia, you'll see these little huts on the side of the road with a bag and a straw in it, and it's they make a tea out of it and they drink it for productivity enhancement,
mm,
endurance, just to feel better. I like their version of Starbucks.
yeah.
Um, but unfortunately, like we've done with a lot of things, we started bringing kratom came here in the 70s with when the veterans came back from Vietnam.
Mm,
It also came when certain Asian groups migrated here earlier than that and during that period. So that's when it was introduced into the U.S. It didn't really, it was just kind of minor use up until uh, more recently when companies took it and started making extracts out of it.
mm,
So they would go in and similar to like you do with coca leaves and cocaine, they would, use solvents, either, different types of ethanol or CO2 or whatever, and extract out uh, and make it more concentrated. And then also even change the profile of the
mm,
alkaloids. Um, that becomes a much different thing.
right.
Uh, it would be like we were talking before. It's like the difference between CBD and high concentration THC.
Yeah.
Those are two totally different things that are used for two totally different
Right.
purposes.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's a very low understanding of that by health practitioners, government, regulators, the consumers themselves, that when anybody's talking about kratom, they just say kratom.
Yeah. Right.
Well, leaf kratom, which is what's been used for centuries, is one thing, and these isolates and all these concentrates and things, that's a whole different thing.
Mm,
Um, when I first started experimenting with it, I tried both, and I very quickly decided that the way it's been used for centuries is the way to use it.
right.
I mean, that
Don't
to
muck with
me,
nature,
because I
right?
was
Yeah.
looking for health and wellness and productivity enhancement. I wasn't looking to get high,
Right.
and so I chose to go that route. Unfortunately, the largest part of the industry now has gone the other route, and they've created these extracts and concentrates that um, are more about getting high.
Probably more profitable
I
too. They
don't
could
want
probably
to
scale more,
sit here
right?
and lie to anyone about it. That's what it
Yeah.
is, and that's creating problems.
Mm,
So What we're really focused on going forward is the education of the difference between the two. We're doing a lot of our own clinical work. The FDA itself is actually doing a safety study right now on whole leaf kratom alone.
Mm.
Um, and we have a symposium coming up in Florida in February that'll be the largest gathering of government, scientists, everyone that's related in this field that are going to discuss this in more detail. But our goal for 24 is to introduce regulations specific to whole leaf kratom.
Hmm.
Um, I'm a firm believer that it needs to be regulated. It needs to be regulated so that we don't have contaminants, we don't have heavy metals that are over limits, that we
Right.
have dosage restrictions, that we have age limits. The kids don't need to be consuming
Right.
any of these types of substances, and consumer education. We're going to build out a continuing education program for health practitioners that they can come and learn about the difference. And then, we're also going to introduce, ask for a tax that will allow for money then for the governments to be able to enforce this regulation.
Right.
So that's where we're going to spend a big part of our effort for the coming years is again, like they've done with CBD and hemp, they created separate regulation for that versus all the other stuff. And I think I'm not saying that that other stuff should or shouldn't be on the market. That's not my position. What I'm saying is it's different. It
Right.
needs different regulation. It needs different guardrails, all of that. And that's fine. That's, for them to figure out. I'm just going to focus on what our science, uh, the leading scientists in this field right now are of the same mindset that I am, and that's that there is data that supports that holy kratom is safe. There's not enough data yet on the other things.
Mm. The
There will
DE.
be at some point in time. They need to do the science and find out, but it's not in place right now.
Right. Now the DEA. What something happened in 16? They try to ban it, or what happened? Was
So
it
yeah,
16?
in 2000, it started in 2016. There was a company called, actually started before that. There was a company called Vivazin, which was one of the first companies to do an extract, kratom extract. They created a little shot, and it took off like a rocket in the southeast part of the country, and that got the attention of other industries and regulators and stuff. So they came in and again, no understanding of the difference between historic use and how it was being used now.
Yeah.
They just said we want to ban all of it.
Mm.
They got all the way to the last stage, and which I think is the only time this has ever happened. Congress came in and overturned it. Um, there was some science that had been done that really wasn't buttoned up well, and there were some things that somewhat misrepresented,
Mm.
and several congressmen called them out on it and were able to stop it. So they tried a couple more times after that. They tried just as recent as last year. They went to the World Health Organization and tried to get an international ban on it. And the panel of scientists at the World Health Organization looked at all the current science and said, "There's nothing." There were three different substances that were presented at the same time. Of those three, two of them were banned, and kratom, they said there's no science to support banning it.
So what's the basis on which these folks are going after it? To try to ban it? What's the?
There was some science that was done back in like 2018, 17 that was very one-sided, uh, and they're hanging their hat on that. Um, it's interesting because this issue has really come to the front recently because there was a case in Florida where a smuggling case where a guy was bringing kratom in under labeling it as something else, which is he shouldn't have been doing. I'm not saying he should. And when it got down to the sentencing, the judge signaled that he was not going to, do much to him. So uh, the U.S. attorney came in at, prodded by the FDA and introduced all this, how dangerous it is. It's killing all these people and all that. Uh, so the judge said, okay, if that's the case, show me, prove
Yeah.
it, come to court, prove that, if you want me to enhance this guy's sentence, I want you to, which he did the right thing.
Mm.
So the U.S. attorney sent an email to the FDA and said, you need to show up and prove it. The FDA wrote back on that same email and said, we're sorry, at this time, we don't know whether it is or isn't. We can't. And I guess the U.S. attorney was mad, and he sent that email to the defendant's counsel and showed it to him. And immediately, of course, the defendant's counsel uh, filed that as a public filing.
Mm.
So the FDA is on record stating that they don't know whether it's dangerous or not, which
Mm.
makes some sense to me because the study that they're doing, the clinical study they're doing in Florida right now is with whole leaf is pointing to the same thing. I think it's, I'm not sitting here saying that all kratom is the same. It's not all good either. There's some products in the market that shouldn't be in the market. I think the problem is that everyone's just saying kratom. They're
Right.
not saying leaf kratom versus kratom extract versus kratom, isolate. And that's the missing piece. So that's the piece we're focused on clearing up.
Right. I think it's interesting. You know, if people chemistry is very complicated, right? I think the average person doesn't get it, right? And nor should. I mean, it's not.
Yeah,
It's like, but you can make, isn't cyanide made from apple seeds? Or if you chemically move things around the right way, something that's completely, you know, non, toxic could be completely healthy, or vice versa.
you can
I mean,
take
it's very
you can
complicated.
take most things, and if you manipulate it the right
Right.
way, it turns into something
Right.
that's way way different than mother. I'm always going to default to leaving Mother Nature alone.
Right. Right. Right.
I mean, there are some things that you can slightly alter and actually make them better.
Right.
But there are a lot of things that you need to leave alone
Yeah, if given the
because,
choice, leaving it alone is probably generally statistically going to be more in that bell curve if that's
yeah,
the
I mean,
better thing to
if
do.
it will accomplish what you want it to accomplish with leaving it alone, you better leave it alone.
Right. But you're right. The next step is to enhance. Oh, how do I get more of this? And then
Yeah,
when you do that, you're going to bring along something along the way that's going to be that enhance the negative side of it. Right.
always
So
unintended
yeah,
consequences.
yeah, that's the right phrase. Yeah. But now going back to these folks that are trying to ban it, who are they and what's their agenda? Is it just I'm skeptically, I'm thinking it can't be a bunch of just, folks that are looking out for humanity. Is there an agenda there? Are they part of the pharmaceutical lobby that doesn't like? Am I being overly skeptical there, or
you
what?
know, and I've said this on podcasts and stuff before, that I thought that it was and all of that. I'm beginning to think that that's not so much the case. I think it really is more about you don't know what you don't know,
Mm,
and that because kratom is getting all lumped together, that there's mixed signals out there and mixed data sets that are getting all put together, and it looks messy.
yeah.
When you separate it out, it actually is a very clear picture, especially when you take that then and take it and look at it in the landscape of your choices,
Right.
alcohol, tobacco, all these other things, and look and see like the poison control data and the Google search data for addiction and
Yeah.
all these things. You see a very clear picture of, even when you normalize that, you see a clear picture of the relative safety profile. Uh, both physical and addiction of these substances.
Right. Right. And so it's technically, and I know folks use it. If you read about, a lot of folks use it to get off opioids, right? But so it's opioid like, but it's not an opioid. Is that a
They're
correct statement?
they're using, not so much from what we're doing some work with John Hopkins,
Mm,
and they're doing a lot of surveys and stuff. And from what they're telling me, when they go out and talk to Kratom users that are identifying that they're using it for opioid withdrawal, um, they're not using the powders to speak of. I mean, some of them are using a little bit of that. They're mainly using the extracts and concentrates.
mm,
Um, Again, the powders don't give you the same feeling as these extracts do, because these extracts are 100 or 1,000 times more potent.
right.
Um, it's just a really different thing. So again, that's the other thing is the different forms. People are using them primarily for different purposes.
Right.
If you look at just the powder, most people are doing the same thing they have been for centuries in Southeast Asia. They're using it for productivity enhancement,
Right.
just like you would caffeine.
Right. Right.
Um, when you take it and put it in different forms, other than that, people use it for,
Right.
I don't know how else to put it. They use it for getting high. I mean,
Right.
that's
Right. Right.
gets even more complicated because then you put in, you know, people's genetics, and you have some people
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
I don't care what they're consuming, they're over consuming it.
Right.
They
Yeah.
just go from one thing to the other. And when you start talking to people, usually they're consuming their poly use. They're
Yeah.
taking 4 or 5 different things at the same time and abusing all of them.
Right. Right. Right.
And then they're wondering why, they're getting in trouble. It's like, well,
Yeah. And
your body's
every
toxic.
exactly, and I think you perhaps sure you know this data more than better than I do. Just my quick, googling around prior to this to prepare for this conversation. At least every, I mean, maybe there was a few that slipped through the crack, but every cited case that I had seen about negative consequences of kratom use or even kava use, there was always like 3 or 4 other things that the person was using.
Yeah,
That you could be like, wait a minute,
yeah,
you were mixing that with Ritalin? Like, what do you think? I mean,
yeah,
or you were on an antidepressant and you were drinking and you had some kratom in your system. Well, are you really going
yeah.
to make? I mean, right? So it's like you're right. Throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, it's an understatement there. It's like crazy,
Yeah,
but
and I wish there was something out there that that had no habit forming component to it, but that's a fantasy, because anything that rewards you is going to be habit forming.
right, lemon
To
water.
me, again,
Yeah,
that's not the question to be asking, because that's a given. What the question
yeah,
to ask is that, does it work? And if I use it on a regular basis, is it going to hurt me?
yeah. Right,
And if you can answer those two things positively, then yeah, that's your thing.
right. And you would think if you check those two boxes, the legality would automatically follow that this should be legal. Like if a person X is, and
Yeah.
most people are going to take something and it's not going to hurt them, and is it work? Then would think legality
Well, I
would
think that
follow. Yeah,
that's what saved Kratom so far, is that it is safe.
hmm
But where it's headed, though, with these stronger and stronger concentrates and isolates and things like that, it's going to implode,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, but folks like you doing trying to keep those, like you said, separate, right? They're separate. So let's not throw the
Yeah.
baby out with the bathwater. And the other two things, the withdrawals, right? There are legitimate withdrawals, right? From if you're taking kratom every single day, you will have that, those withdrawal feelings.
No different than
But
caffeine.
again, I was going to say,
Uh,
try that with caffeine. I mean, you're going to feel like you're
yeah.
going to want to die. I mean, I've done it. I've
Yeah.
done,
No,
it's
it's
horrible.
again,
Yep,
you're changing your body's chemistry,
exactly. Right,
and when you abruptly stop that, your body doesn't like it, and so
right,
you're not gonna feel good for a while.
right.
It's not gonna kill you, but it's gonna be unpleasant.
Right. Stopping caffeine cold turkey, you're kind of gonna wish you're dead for a week or so. I mean, it's just a
Yeah,
reality.
you mentioned the Diet Cokes. I got to where, for a period of time, I was drinking, 6 or 7 of them a day, and
hmm
I decided just to stop, and I thought my head was gonna explode. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
take Advil, and Everything else I get my hands on, it wouldn't even touch it.
Yeah.
And I was just out in La La Land for
Yeah.
the first few days.
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, Diet Coke. I feel like Diet Coke it's a tricky one. There's something going on in there. I mean, that it's, I don't know anyone that drinks Diet Coke once a day. Something about it is very,
Now
people that go in with Diet Coke, they're all in. Like they're all in.
I actually had I had the opportunity to go down to Atlanta and go through their facility, and
Mm,
I mean, you go in there, there's 100 white coats, and
yeah.
they're working on
Right.
various things, in the lab. So
Make it
there's
taste like sugar without sugar, right? Yep. Yep.
yeah, yeah, there definitely is something going on there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to comment on whether it's safe or not safe. I don't know, but I do know that it is habit forming.
I love it. It's wonderful. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I do remember trying to wean off it. I mean, I try to wean off. I was doing, gosh, I was probably doing closer to 10 a day. I mean, it's and going off it was, yeah, the withdrawals were real, and the only thing that would fix it would be a Diet Coke, because I would kind of like,
Yeah,
and I would just, by like 4 in the afternoon, I'd say screw it, and I'd have one, and I'd feel great. I'm like, oh well, that was it.
yeah.
Like, how do I, so it was, I'm like, there's got to be
That's
something
why,
more
back
than
to
just the
my
caffeine.
original statement, I don't think people realize that it is a functional drink. Coca-Cola, the reason Coca-Cola got as big as it did,
Mm,
it wasn't about the taste. It's about that it is a great stress and anxiety reliever.
mm. Yeah, that sugar makes you feel wonderful. The sugar and the caffeine make you feel wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And then they figured out how to mimic that sugar with
Hmm.
what else they're doing in a Diet Coke.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. I always say that to folks. Like when you see that line at Starbucks, right? That line is not. People aren't craving some flavor, right? It's much more complicated than that.
No,
The flavor
no.
will eventually get associated with that feeling, but that feeling, that enhancement, that whatever your name is, John, you become John 2.0, and you have that enhanced drink in your hand, right? And that's what everyone,
Yeah,
right?
uh, that's
That's
the secret sauce to
yeah,
Starbucks success.
yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, changing your, like you said, that guy that made that comment. If you could change someone's mood or feeling in 30 minutes or less, you're onto something.
Yeah,
Is
back to that, you think about it, you can't think of a single thing that does that that hasn't become huge.
yeah, 5 hour
And
energy, right?
you can't think of many things that don't do that that have become
Yeah.
huge. Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I mean,
Whether
it's
it's Red Bull or, whatever,
yeah.
because that's really what people are looking for it's not so much about the taste or, it's
Right.
about they want to feel differently.
Right, right, and it's reflected in the cost too. If you really look at it, like there's no way these things should cost $3.50 to make, whatever they get for one, right? Or the cost is definitely the supply and demand injected artificially high price, which
Yeah,
people
the
will pay it.
general thing seems to be people are willing to spend about $4 to $5
Mm,
to feel differently in a short period of time.
yeah,
You see that in Starbucks, you see that, and just pretty much everything.
right.
It's that seems to be what people are, and then from defense of the people that are producing it, if you do it right and you use premium ingredients and all that, it does cost,
Yeah,
it costs a lot to produce it. You can do it cheaper, but you're going to have to cut corners.
right, right. Well, in your case, people are willing to spend what, 10, $12 a bottle, and they're
They're
doing it.
spending, yeah, $9 to $10 a bottle, but it's for two servings.
Ah,
So
okay, gotcha.
they're
Right,
getting, and it's the ingredients that we're using are extremely expensive.
right,
Um, because of all the tariffs and the freight moving it around and all of that and the premium packaging. And
right.
I just, again, we could do it a cheaper version, but I built this thing to consume myself, and I still consume it myself
Mm,
on a regular basis. My family does, and I just don't want to cut the corners.
right. Yeah. So now, feel free. Classic is what we're referring to, right? And that's the Kava and the Kratom in it. Now you have a new product out. Now, what's in
Yes.
this? What's in this new product? How's it different?
So the new product for, some people are allergic to kratom.
Oh.
Similar to people who are allergic to peanuts or lactose or
Mm-hmm.
gluten or whatever. There's just a small fraction of people that just their system doesn't like it. So we tried to create a version that mimics the classic, much like Diet Coke,
Yeah.
but doing it with natural substances. So we use cola nut, which is caffeine,
Mm.
rhodiola, and lion's mane. And the combination of those three
Mm.
things are to try to mimic what kratom does.
Oh, interesting.
I, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's the same thing because it's not. Um, it's close. It is more energizing. It's more to me. It's more of an energy drink
Mm-hmm.
than it is what the classic is. What I've found is that a lot of people are using both. Um, they'll use one earlier in the day and a different one, a
Mm.
different like a half a shot of one and then a half a shot of the other later in the day. Um, but still though by far, and just because it was the one we didn't introduce this until recently, the classic is still the star of the show.
Mm. Interesting. Was there a study I heard you reference in a prior podcast that was it 70? You gave a bunch of like 50 folks the classic on day one, and the same 50 people the new one and they
We
chose the new
we
one,
did
or
a yeah we did a naive blind study where people hadn't had uh, the classic before, and it was about 60-40, the new versus the old.
huh?
And I really think now that I'm thinking back, I think that was more dictated by the taste because the new tastes better than the old does. Um, I think with time people would gravitate the opposite, but we put it in the market. It's available so that people have a
Mm.
choice and let people decide.
Interesting. Now, last time we spoke, you said you had something new hitting the market, and you had to clear through legal. Was that? I think that was after the new one came out. Was there something else you got brewing that you can talk about, or?
Yeah, we're working on introducing a soda.
Oh.
Uh, so it'll be a 8.4 ounce. It's sparkling lemonade.
Mm.
So it's a carbonated drink that uses a new formula, but that won't now be probably introduced until mid next year.
Okay. Okay. Some combination of the ingredients we already talked about, or some new proprietary TBD thing.
Um, Combination of what we've already used
All right, I was
before.
trying to put you in the corner there. Nice, well played. Very interesting. Well, so JW, so your backstory is, I always go back a little deep with some folks. It's like I was going to start up by asking, like, what were you medicating yourself from growing up and all that. And you touched on all that. Your backstory was interesting, and you know,
Yeah,
I heard you say it at an interview you had done where because I always ask folks, like, how was your family growing up, right? Because I think we all have these addictions to some level. I don't care who you are, and
mhm.
the psychologists always go back to how was your childhood. I mean, you said in a podcast I think I saw you weren't comfortable in your own skin. You had some family was a little
Yeah.
unique, but
I grew up in a very distant family. I don't
uh,
remember seeing, this is going to sound like I don't remember a single time that, either one of my parents said, I love you or, any of that.
hmm,
It wasn't, it wasn't adversarial or any of that. It was just that we weren't a touchy feely, lovey family.
hmm,
Everybody kind of went and did their own thing. Parents were very busy and, um, I just really never developed close relationships
hmm,
until much later in life. Um, and I think that lack of emotion, or and I've actually read some studies now on they did a big study in Europe on orphans during the war, how that lack of interaction and emotional connection earlier in your life changes you.
Yeah. Literally
And
rewires
I
your
think
brain.
that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I think I carried for the longest time. I carried this thing that there was something wrong with me,
Mm.
and I remember uh, I was talking to a therapist one time, and I was going on and on about that, and he looked at me and he goes, "Have you ever thought about maybe they just didn't like you that much?" And I was like, "No," because you automatically assume that your parents, love you. And he
Yeah.
said, "Well, maybe it's just that they were busy with their own lives and they just didn't really, think about you that much."
Hmm.
And I know that sounds like a very brutal thing to say to somebody, but it was to me it was enlightening, because it was like, okay, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. We just weren't the normal family.
Mm.
And okay, I understand that now. It is what it is, and I don't have to keep carrying this around
Yeah.
with me,
Right.
thinking that I did something wrong or they did something wrong. It just it wasn't like it normally would be.
Yeah. I do think though, as a parent, and it's hard it's hard. Hindsight's always 2020, but you have your own life, and then you have a child, and it's you need to kind of step up a little bit. And I mean, right? It's not just
Yeah,
okay that you
I'm
have a
not I'm not defending them at all.
yeah,
You know, I'm just saying, when I look back and really study it,
yeah,
they both had families that were the same way. And we came from
interesting.
generations of family that just didn't show much emotion.
Mm, yeah,
So when I got out into the world, which I did at a very young age, I didn't really know how to deal with people. And, you know,
mm,
until I took my first sip of alcohol, and I went from, not wanting to really talk to anybody to being the life of the party. And it's like, it was love at first sight.
rest was history.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And it worked. It worked great for a long time. I mean, it worked
yeah,
fabulous. And then it didn't work too well.
yeah, yeah. That line with alcohol is it's very fine, where it's like you're good and then you're not. Like, does that you could jump that line
I
so
think
quickly.
about alcohol as kind of the same way as I do about these high concentrations or extracts,
Yeah,
isolates.
yep, yep.
Alcohol is very hard to dose.
Mm,
It's quick acting. It works really well,
yeah,
but it's kind of short life. So you keep, more and more and
keep
more,
stacking.
and
Yeah,
next
yeah,
thing
yeah.
you know, you've done too much, and
Right,
you're over that line, and then you can't really easily go back.
right.
Um, I think it, and that's why I think in its more concentrated forms, it creates even more problems, and
Mm,
it's a much different thing, a beer or a glass of wine versus an Everclear.
right, right, right. Yeah,
That's a vastly different experience. And I would argue that there's nobody drinking Everclear or Jägermeister or something like that. They're not drinking that for for just social lubrication.
right. They're
They're
trying to,
drinking
yeah,
that to get high.
they're trying to exit the current reality. Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, well, JW, really appreciate the time. So you said that's coming out
Yeah.
next year. We'll see that soda on the market, maybe 24. You think?
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
You bet.